Hello everyone, welcome to the SDGs Lead. It's a series of conversation aimed at inspiring young trailblazers as well as promoting best sustainability practices from bold experts and practitioners. I'm very delighted to talk today with Mr. Marcus Brandt, head of the program in Myanmar of International Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance. Mr. Brandt, thank you very much for joining. It's really great pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
You have more than 20 years of amazing experience, and you lived in different countries, including Thailand, Nepal, Poland, Sweden, Ukraine, Kosovo, Myanmar, and other countries. Where this interest for such international work, international contribution comes from? If you could maybe briefly share your story, your passion, your devotion.
Well, thank you for this question. I would say, when I grew up in Vienna, in Austria in the 1980s, I already then loved traveling and the possibilities that I had traveling in Western Europe in those years. And then when I finished school in 1989, that was also the year when the Berlin Wall fell and the Iron Curtain came down, and it became possible to travel around Eastern Europe. And then a few years later, the wars in former Yugoslavia broke out. And so this all became a very immediate experience for me. And I very quickly realized that traveling and living in other countries is something that adds so much to perspective and life experience that I basically just never stopped exploring. And I think this is an experience many people share who have gone out of their own comfort zone of where they grew up and their familiar environment. And I just made a lifetime passion out of it. And then I also basically have lived more than half of my life now outside my own home country. And I was also lucky to eventually come into a career path with international organizations that allowed me to follow this passion and to live and work in different countries, and to try even to help countries in crisis, poor countries, conflict-affected countries, to develop on a path of reform and eventually sustainable development. And so when I was working with the UN, especially United Nations Development Program, I got quite a lot into, obviously, the UN's global overarching development framework, which is the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. And I had the chance, in particular in 5 years in Ukraine, to work a lot in practical terms, both at the government level and at the local community level, with reference to the SDGs.
What do you think as a key prerequisite of reaching sustainability, of keeping up with this quite ambitious plan in terms of 2030? As we understand, it's needed on all the levels to achieve this peace, gender equality, etc., all SDGs.
Yeah, well, we don't know yet what it will take to achieve sustainability, because we are at the moment not on the right path to it. And I also think it's quite obvious that the story will not end in 2030. That, the Agenda 2030, as already previously the Millennium Declaration, which was sort of the preceding global framework document, was not in itself written with an expiry date, so to say. These visions that are enshrined in the Agenda 2030 are supposed to guide us for the foreseeable future, but it is only by setting time relevant dates dated goals that we actually can mobilize the resources and the focus to achieve certain of these objectives. And so one shouldn't get too hung up about the year 2030, because whatever is agreed in the Agenda 2030 is something that we will need to achieve and accomplish even more so in the years after 2030. I think the sense of urgency comes from especially the context of the climate crisis, where we know very well that the longer we wait, the harder it will become to turn things around. And that's also why it's very important to enshrine the climate goals, climate action very firmly into this broader set of development goals. And as I said, we really don't know yet whether we are on course to make it. At the moment, all the reports that we are getting, especially with regard to the climate crisis, are not encouraging at all. And so I would just say that it is now more important than ever to motivate, especially the young generation, to act and to unite, to collaborate globally, and to put enough pressure on political leaders and decision makers and power holders to not push this sort of to the as a long-term goal. We need radical transformation, and that is also what the title, the full title of the Agenda 2030 is about: transformation. And so we will not do enough with simply continuing business as usual and with small steps and cosmetic changes. What we need is a complete transformation of our world, and here's sort of my more specific area of specialization. We also need to focus on governance reforms, and in particular, various aspects of democracy, such as human rights, equality, non-discrimination, inclusion, effective institutions, because without those, we will not be able to achieve any of the other goals.
Exactly. Thank you very much for this comprehensive aspect, and also for putting this climate change perspective. Over the recent days, we have seen also this tragic situation in Turkey, Syria, in terms of how we are all dependent on our planet Earth, on this climate situation. So it's not just long-term perspective, but it can be just out of expectations immediately collapsed, and also in terms of application of weapons, not the least in Ukraine, Syria, other countries. Can I a bit return to your intercultural experience, because it's really very interesting to discover countries. For me, some countries in which you have been living, like Myanmar, Nepal, are just like in our books perspective. Hopefully one day they will be more real. But maybe just as a kind of insight, what were some unexpected encounters from cultural perspective in these countries, maybe 2 or 3 examples that come to your mind. What surprised you maybe mostly on your path?
Well, I think I would say 2 things. On the one hand, traveling a lot and living in different countries, learning different languages, it gives you a strong sense of humility and a sense of perspective, of your own cultural background. Most people just take their own cultural setting and cultural background as a given, and as the other hand, there are also a lot of surprising commonalities. Did I just lose you now briefly?
Yes, me also, it was a bit stopped. Can you please repeat your last sentence?
So I'll repeat. So basically, on the one hand, you get a sense of humility and appreciation for diversity, and you put your own cultural background into perspective and see that as more relative, and you, in a way, start to question your own assumptions and convictions about how the world should function. But at the same time, there are also a surprising number of universal issues and common aspects in all cultures where, basic values such as integrity and honesty and dignity are really something that all humans in all cultures appreciate. And so I think there is, and that is sort of, for me, part of the fascination of getting to know unknown places where I don't speak the language, I'm not familiar with the cultural code, but still one is able to actually connect with people on a human level, because people just feel and sense the attitude that you and the respect that you approach them with. And in that way, you can connect even with people in very, very far away and very different parts of the world.
Wow, thank you very much. Exactly this kind of spiritual values of interconnections between people. In 2019, I started the project 100 Words for Peace, where we collected what is peace for different people in the world. As of now, approximately 100 countries, people from these countries share their visions. And it turned out that, in fact, it's very, very similar, regardless of language, culture, etc. So we all want to live in democratic world, to live peacefully with equality, with no bombs speaking. May I ask, what is peace personally for you from human perspective? How do you perceive this word?
Well, that's a big question, but the first thing that comes to mind, it's funny that you're asking this question, because the last 2 hours I was just talking with a colleague here about ways in which we could help a peace process in Myanmar to come about. Myanmar is at the moment going through a very big crisis as a result, of course, of the military coup 2 years ago. But at the same time, there is a peace process going on between the various communities, different linguistic, religious communities in the country that have had very different experiences over the last decades and generations, and that need somehow to come together to form a new nation once the military regime is over, and to build a new peaceful country as a democratic society. And when we were talking about this, it became so obvious how important the connection is between, let's say, an external and formal constitutional legal peace process and the inner attitudes among people and relationships between people, and what could even call the inner peace of individuals, but in particular political leaders, to be able to reach out to others and bridge differences and cooperate with each other. So, sure. So I wanted to mention that it is important to connect the let's say formal legal constitutional peace arrangements with inner development goals and inner peace. I was mentioning the initiative by Thomas Björkman, a Swedish retired businessman in Stockholm, to frame the so-called inner development goals in relation to the sustainable development goals, and demonstrating how personal qualification and personal attitudes play a key role in societal level achievement of development goals as a whole. And the same is for peace. I think it's when people, individuals who have political leadership functions, have a level of inner peace, they will be able to bridge differences and cooperate with others and overcome conflict. And so I think it is as important for educational institutions, also maybe religious institutions, to foster sort of the inner aspects of sustainable development, of peace, and of an intercultural understanding, because at the end of the day, it comes down to individual people. And the only thing that you can really change and control in your life is yourself and your attitudes and your own thoughts. And if you do that successfully, you will be able to inspire others, but you cannot actually make others do that. Everybody has to take responsibility for themselves. And if this becomes a process at mass scale, at societal level, then we can probably also achieve societal transformation.
Absolutely. So this piece, it reminds me of the doctrine of Kant, the philosopher, well-known philosopher who wrote that if you start, what should I do, what I am supposed to do to ask on this level, we could achieve a more peaceful world. Exactly, because it's human being in the final terms who push, who uses the weapons, who start these atrocities, etc. So on this level, you started also talking about their qualifications in terms of peaceful mindset, inner peace. Could you elaborate on this to a bit build a portrait of international professionals? What qualities, what smart characteristics to be efficient?
I'm not really the person who has, formulated this in a very eloquent way, but I was referring to these inner development goals just before, and there you actually have a collection, a set of characteristics that individuals can try to develop in themselves in order to be more effective in terms of sustainable development, but also maybe peacemaking. And these are things like the ability to listen, the ability to communicate, the ability to present concisely, the ability to collaborate, to bridge differences, the ability to work with one's own mental biases, so there are many aspects to this. And I think altogether it comes down to a readiness to change one's own position, to, in a way, reduce one's own ego and to try to look for common solutions for the common good. And once you start doing that, you actually attract a lot of people who have the same kind of mindset. And it is those people that you can actually achieve a lot together with. It's a constant learning process. It's a constant self-development process. And I don't think really that there are any, let's say, ready-made solutions or answers for this. But I think everybody themselves can try and embark on that path and, keep reading, keep learning, keep exploring, and questioning one's own assumptions and just remain curious and open-minded. That is, I think, some quite important ingredients.
It's very wonderful, very useful ingredients, and I think really the key. What are the kind of books, what books list would you recommend to explore? Maybe some books that impacted you the most on your path?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I basically take up the next book when I put one down. So I try to read as much as I can in my free time. And I think one should really, there are at every airport, in every airport bookshop, you find a whole list of self-development books. And many of them are really, worth reading, and they're bestsellers for a good reason. But I think one should not, focus too much on a reading list of sorts. I think people should just read whatever makes them discover, interesting sides in themselves, wherever their passion leads them. So I think it's good to have a variety. One book that comes to mind that I have recommended to quite a few of my friends and colleagues is Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People. It's a classic from about 100 years ago that has been translated into many languages. And I think it's maybe not high literature, but I think it nails down some very basic elements of human interaction that I think are useful for everybody to know and that everybody can learn from and do something with.
It's a really great book, one of my favorites, and it also, I think, helps to bring peace in our world overall, because when we communicate, interact, and discover. Thank you very much for this chance to discover and to learn a lot from you during this conversation. Can you please share as a like a kind of conclusion for your message, for your inspiration, your message to the world leaders and not the least young leaders on their way of how to build this interconnected world of happiness, mindfulness, and peace, and maybe like some kind of motivation?
Well, you know, these are very difficult times, you know, for everyone in Ukraine or connected to Ukraine. This is self-evident, but there is a lot of suffering and a lot of reason for desperation and frustration also in Myanmar, where I work. You know, any countries from Belarus to Iran to, the list is long. There are many good reasons to despair, but I think it is very important to not give up and to keep, you know, a positive mindset and to try and take care of one's own mental health. I think we also, during the years of the pandemic, we have all learned how important mental health issues really are for us as individuals and as society. Nowadays, it's much less connected with taboos to talk about mental health, for instance. Also, when it comes to the relation between men and women or in families, you know, mental health issues are the key to many problems. And I think, you know, for everybody should, you know, also give everybody else a lot more slack and recognize that everybody's dealing with a lot of struggles. And, you know, even while putting up a positive, let's say, face, that does not necessarily mean that person isn't struggling inside with lots of challenges and issues. And I think if, you know, at the same time as one should try to stay positive and focus on the possibilities and focus on the glass half full and seeing opportunities, one should also be very understanding and caring about you know, people who struggle at this point. And because, you know, you can go very fast that everybody can basically drop off the cliff and then it will require and need support systems. And so I think everybody should just look around themselves and you know, in their own families, in their own communities, among their friends, there will always be people who need some help. And you know, by, you know, every little investment into well-being will, I think, have returns later on at the societal level. And so these are things that I think, and regardless of any kind of job one has, you know, there is not, I don't think changing the world is the job of a particular elite of change makers and of political leaders. I think this is something that every single individual has a role to play in, no matter, you know, what their position is in job life or in society. And you know, that should also be recognized, that everybody has something to contribute.
Thank you very much for this message. Danke vielmals. And thank you everyone for watching us. Hopefully it might be useful to continue going. And for me, it was also very uplifting, because when you're constantly within this situation in Ukraine, you need this collaboration, partnerships, and conversations to keep up going and to be reminded that our world is one boat, only together we can reach the solution as humans. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. All the best. Good luck.